everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Emma and I make videos about animal rights and vegan travel and lifestyle. So some people go vegan just overnight and they'll be able to tell you about a particular video or documentary that they saw or an interaction they had that made them decide pretty much on the spot to go vegan. And that's amazing, and I admire people that can do that so much, but that was not at all the case with me. I can look back and see a very long series of steps that led me from being a typical omnivore to now being vegan over very many years. In this video I'm going to share with you what those steps were, and then at the end I'm going to talk about a couple of important lessons my journey taught me when it comes to going vegan and how it can help and support other people and help them to hopefully not take as long as I did. So I really think we have to go all the way back to when I was a little kid, and right back then I was one of those people who loved and felt drawn to animals, but of course I also grew up eating all of the usual animal products except eggs, because as a toddler baby I was allergic to them, and then after that I just thought that they seemed really gross, which they are, so I was at least smart about that one. Then in the beginning of high school I had a close friend that went vegetarian or vegan, and that was the first time that I really thought even the tiniest bit about animal agriculture and the things that we do to animals. And I thought, you know, she has a point. This animal agriculture, this factory farming thing specifically that we're doing, it's pretty weird and it's obviously not good for the animals. I remember mentioning to my dad once that this girl had gone vegetarian, and I said, yeah, you know, I think maybe back in the day when people had to hunt for meat, or even when they just had a little farm that would feed their family or maybe some neighbouring families, maybe that was okay, but this industrialized way of doing it seems really creepy to me. And I remember him being like, yeah, but you know, we couldn't provide food for everyone by farming in that kind of manner. That's why we have this factory farming, to meet the demand for meat in a way that works with the amount of land that we have. And I thought, like, yeah, that's right. But what I had no understanding of course, at the time was A, how easy it could be to eat a plant-based diet instead, or what I would eat on such a diet, and B, that we actually could feed everyone in the world on a plant-based diet. So we should just do that instead of the whole farming thing that I found so creepy. But still, after that, I didn't really think about it anymore. I was like, that's all well and good that that friend is vegetarian, but I didn't feel any obligation to change any of my behaviours, and I didn't feel like my habits conflicted with me being an animal lover, or even a person that just doesn't purposely mistreat or cause harm to others, whether I'm particularly fond of them or not. At one stage I learned about sow stalls, and I decided that I wasn't going to eat pork anymore unless it was free range, and at another stage I decided that I wasn't going to eat red meat for ethical reasons, but I would still eat poultry because at that stage I thought of chickens as less sentient or less valuable, but that whole thing of cutting out red meat didn't last very long. So when I eventually moved into my own apartment and began doing all of my own cooking, I found at first that I pretty naturally gravitated towards cooking mainly vegetarian meals, because I hated cutting up meat. That was something that I just thought seemed really gross, I didn't enjoy doing, and I always knew that these products came from animals, of course. You know, I would see pigs' heads or animals' feet, or you know, people would have a whole pig being roasted, things like this. I saw these things, I was aware of these things, but I always found that style of food to be really off-putting and unappetizing. I never liked eating chicken drumsticks, for example. I never liked eating anything that was presented with a bone in it, especially if you had to pick it up by the bone to eat. I loved the taste of the skin of KFC, but every time I would go there I would always order the popcorn chicken once that became a thing. I was the kind of person that on one hand was completely aware of where these products came from, but I also very much wanted to keep that buried in the back of my mind where I could ignore it. I totally avoided thinking about these animals as individuals that were suffering. Another thing that happened over this time period, actually starting from the flat share situation I was in before getting that apartment of my own, was that due to a whole range of factors, mainly not feeling comfortable cooking around flatmates, being depressed, and then having a lot of rats and mice in that apartment thanks to some holes in the roof. I began having long periods where I actually just wouldn't cook, and I would just order takeaways or eat ready meals that, you know, usually weren't vegetarian, or things like instant noodles that required me to spend the minimum amount of time in the kitchen, which inevitably these kinds of meals wouldn't be fulfilling, so I would massively overeat. Since leaving high school, I've gained a little over 30 kgs, and that's not something that just happened and, you know, this is how my body is as an adult, which would be totally fine. It's something that is a result of binge eating and making myself feel ill on a regular basis and dealing with depression and not being able to do, you know, active things that I wanted to do. So in mid-2015, my husband and I moved into a new apartment that didn't have any rodents, thank God, and I was starting to get back into cooking more, but still all these habits are pretty hard to totally break, and I'm still struggling with my mental health. And towards the end of the year, I find myself experiencing severe abdominal pain. I go to hospital and they diagnose me with gallstones and tell me that I might need to have surgery to remove my gallbladder at some point in the near future. For whatever reason, I have always been absolutely terrified of having surgery, and so I was just desperate to avoid having my gallbladder removed. So I started doing medical research online, which is not a great idea oftentimes, but among a lot of dodgy information on how to deal with gallstones, I also found a lot of people recommending just cutting back on or cutting out meat and dairy products. And I thought, okay, that's something that I could actually do, I think. So I decided for the next few weeks I'm going to eat a vegan diet, and specifically it was a really bland vegan diet that was recommended. So I was eating a lot of salads without much spices or herbs added into them, and a lot of toast. And I figured that then after that initial kind of recovery diet of a few weeks, I would go to just being vegetarian. At this time, I wasn't super aware of veganism as a concept. I had a vague idea that it meant not eating meat, but also not eating eggs or dairy or wearing leather, and I knew that ostensibly vegans did this for animal rights reasons, but I somehow still didn't really understand it as a philosophy. I didn't know exactly the reasoning behind why each of these products, other than meat, was being boycotted, so it seemed very ideological to me. I was very into like new atheism at a certain stage, and I still have, or try to have at least, a really rational mindset to apply to things, and I didn't like the idea of just adopting a philosophy that I applied as a blanket to things. So for example, I'm not going to eat oysters even if they're not sentient, because they're technically classified as an animal and vegans don't eat animals. I found that to be very nonsensical, and I didn't want to get into that kind of way of thinking. But gradually, as I was looking up vegetarian and vegan recipes online for my new vegetarian diet, I also started coming across information on the philosophy behind veganism. And I was really confused by the idea of speciesism when I first heard about it, because I was like, well, of course I'm a speciesist. If there's a burning building and I have to make a choice between like a human or a sheep or a lizard, then I'm going to be choosing the human over the sheep. I'm going to be choosing the sheep over the lizard. I thought, of course animals shouldn't be equal with humans. Obviously animals shouldn't be like voting or driving cars and things like this. And obviously I have since learned that when people say that we want to give animals equal rights, it's not literally about having every exact same right that humans have. It's just about the right to not be exploited and killed by us. It's about these very basic rights to life and autonomy. So even when I started learning about these things, I thought, okay, like, I'm not going to be vegan because that's making a blanket ruling. That might not make sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look into every animal product that I might consume and look into how they're produced, and if I'm not okay with what I find out, if I find that that's something that I don't want to be supporting financially, if it's something that I think is unethical, then I'll boycott it. I was like, I'm going to be so rational, I'm going to take everything on a case-by-case basis, and I'll boycott the things that are unethical, and I won't boycott the things that aren't. And, you know, I'm not going to be vegan. So I'm sure that any of you who are vegan who are listening to this know exactly what happened next, which is that I did that, I looked into everything, and I found out that it was all bad, and I was like, oh, the vegans are right. There's none of it I'm okay with. But despite at this point acknowledging that the vegans were right, I still didn't feel that sense of moral conviction that some people describe having, that makes them think, okay, I don't know exactly how to do it yet, but I'm gonna figure it out, I'm gonna go vegan tomorrow. I didn't have that, and something that still put me off from going vegan at that point was that I had seen a number of vegans on Instagram, and they all seemed to be these incredibly fit Insta models who were really into yoga and ate massive salad bowls and smashed avocados. That's the image of veganism and a vegan diet that was in my brain. And as much as I wanted to become healthier, I didn't want to be that healthy. I was thinking, yeah, I definitely want to incorporate some more salads and some more veggies into my diet, but I don't want to never have pasta again, or never have a bowl of curry, or never have nachos like these people were portraying themselves as. After the few weeks of the bland vegan diet to recover from my gallstone attacks, I was ready to transition to a more normal vegetarian diet, and I kept coming across more vegan YouTube channels and vegan recipes, and I learned more about the philosophy and about vegan food and how diverse it could be, yet I still stayed vegetarian for over 3 years. I would eat vegan whenever it was just absolutely no extra effort on my part to do so. So what I mean by that is, if I wanted to make a pizza, it'd be a vegan pizza, because right there on the shelf in the supermarket was a vegan mozzarella cheese for pizza that I tried and I was really happy with, so I just kept buying that. But if I wanted to make a salad and I wanted to have feta cheese in my salad, well, there was no alternative for that available to me, so I would just buy the real feta cheese. The only vegan ice creams in the supermarket at that time were coconut based, which I tried and really did not like. So if I got a craving for ice cream, I would have a dairy milk ice cream. My other issue was that I completely lacked the confidence at that time to tell anyone that I wanted vegan options, or to just deal with the kind of stigma that can come in mainstream society from being vegan. Partially, my reluctance to ask people for things came from me feeling like not sure if I would stay vegan once I did go vegan, and I thought it would be so embarrassing to announce, you know, I'm going vegan, isn't it wonderful, and then fall off the wagon. So despite my lack of commitment in terms of what I was spending my money on though, I nonetheless really believed in the idea of animal liberation, and my ideal future world was a vegan world. I was completely on board. I was thinking vegans are 100% right. I was watching vegan debate videos and things like this on YouTube at this time, and, you know, I was completely agreeing with things the vegans said. I'd be like, yeah, you tell that cunnus, like, you know what's up, they're totally wrong, all these kinds of things, even though I wasn't living that out in my own life myself. But as more products came out and I started trying more things, the amount of animal products I was consuming kept decreasing, but I still lacked the confidence to take it to that final level. Then in November 2018, I read a book, and I'm going to do an entire other video on this book and all of the lessons within it, because it's not a book that you'd expect. It's not even about veganism or animal rights at all, but it has so many insights that could be applied to any movement to bring about social change. And when I finished this book, I was inspired. I thought, wow, the things that these people did for their cause, the lengths that they went to, and I have such a privileged life and I have every opportunity available to me compared to these people, and I can't even ask for a vegan option. I can't even tell people, no, I don't eat that. I can't just not have an ice cream and let the craving pass by. Seriously? So from that point on, I felt like I had to go vegan at least, and I had to make my genuine best effort to live according to my values. And there was a selfishness in this decision. I wanted to be a person that was on the right side of history. My whole life I loved reading books about people facing oppression, or they saw other people facing oppression and they fought against it. these were the kinds of people that I looked up to, and I'd always wondered, you know, if I had been alive in that kind of situation, or if I had been around in that time and place, what would I have done? Would I have been one of these people that was doing the right thing, even though it was difficult? So much more difficult than it is to go vegan in my current situation. And I realized that the way I'd been living most of my life so far actually showed me that I would have been one of the people who, you know, wasn't a really bad person, who wasn't the person that was actually actively putting these oppressive systems in place, but who was part of the silent majority that let it continue. And I had previously always thought maybe I wouldn't have been. And I wanted to be now, whether for my own sense of ego or to avoid guilt, I don't know which was stronger, but I knew that the absolute least I could do was stop continuing to pay for these things. And it was so easy for me to go vegan compared to what it would be for many people. I didn't come from a family where meat was really important. Like, yeah, we ate meat with most meals, but it was just kind of there as a protein source because, you know, my mum didn't really know about plant proteins and think that you could get enough protein from them. And it wasn't really important to us culturally though. Some families that I know, my husband's for example, the meat that they eat is more meaty and it's more central to the meal, and it just seems to be viewed as more important. When I was growing up, a typical meal my mum would make would be something like a pasta or rice dish, and there'd be small bits of chicken or beef throughout the sauce or inside the pasta, or there'd be maybe a piece of crumbed chicken and some vegetables on the side. So the meat was just kind of there. Whereas my husband's family would have like roast dinners and would have things like a rack of lamb or a roll of beef that was marinated in a specific way to bring out more of its flavors. He would sometimes tell me about things that they were having that I didn't even know what they were. So the meat would be much more at the center of the meal. I also didn't have any family that hunted or that worked in animal agriculture. I had some experience of cooking without meat. I lived in a city of a decent size that's fairly kind of liberal and open-minded. I'm a woman, so I haven't grown up having my gender identity conflated with eating meat or hearing messages that vegetarian or vegan women are less feminine in the way that men do with their masculinity. I was able to afford things like vegan ice creams that did start coming out and things like Beyond Burgers. And well, of course, a whole foods plant-based diet can be incredibly cheap, much cheaper than eating meat. I would 100% be lying if I said that those more expensive alternatives didn't really help me in going vegan and don't make remaining vegan a whole lot more fun to be able to have those things occasionally. So, what are the lessons I learned from this journey that we can use to try and help others to not take so damn long to go vegan, or that we can use to assist our movement overall? One is that we need to all understand the role that a person's conception of their identity plays in their decision making and in the formation of their opinions. It's much more relevant and impactful than their conception of being rational or the validity of any facts you might tell them. When people feel their identity is being threatened, they will often retreat into their current position and become more entrenched in their views. An identity of mine that initially felt threatened by veganism was my identity as a foodie. I loved going out and eating at different restaurants and trying the new dishes and going to food festivals and all those kinds of things, and especially because I had those insta-vegan salad bowls in mind, I really felt like veganism would put something of a stop to this. When I saw that vegan foodies were a thing and that vegan food could really be anything, I realized that I could just adapt my identity to now being a vegan foodie. And yeah, I might not now be able to eat as many dishes at as many restaurants, but I can play a small part in supporting those that do have exciting vegan food to try and help try to grow that in my own small way, and that is so much more exciting to me than just saying like, oh, I've been to this restaurant this number of times and I've tried this dish. You know, I've tried all these dishes at this restaurant. It became so much easier for me to get on board with when I realized that I could just work it into that part of my lifestyle. The other aspect to this is that I had another identity that aligned with me being vegan. I identified pretty strongly with being an animal lover, even though I wasn't living in alignment with that in a practical sense. And that is why I think it's usually not helpful to tell non-vegans who identify as animal lovers that they don't love animals because they're paying for them to be killed. While there's truth to that, it risks making them feel their identity is being attacked and becoming obstinate. We can usually have a lot more success if we recognize the ways in which they do love and show compassion towards animals and really validate and just encourage them to lean into that more. Another thing that came up for me, of course, was this identity of being rational. Even though that's not how we normally make our decisions, you know, I felt like I wanted to apply this mode of thinking to my decisions. I didn't want to make my decision based on emotion, and this eventually was really conflicting with it because I realized, you know, I would watch these debate videos and I saw, okay, every counter argument to being vegan is being debunked. There is no valid counter argument. And once I realized that, it actually fit into that aspect of my identity so well. So we need to be aware of what identities and what aspects of a person's sense of self are going to play into them being vegan, whether it might be something that makes it a harder sell to them or something that makes it easier. We should be aware of this and try to tailor our message accordingly. My second lesson is that while we all wish everyone could and would connect with the ethical imperative to go vegan right away and would do so, realistically, many people will not. So while it's great to encourage this, we also need to focus on enabling the difficulty barrier to entry to veganism to come down. It shouldn't have mattered to me that there weren't good vegan ice creams in New Zealand supermarkets in 2016, but it did. I shouldn't have been worried about any judgment I would get for stepping outside of mainstream society and criticizing its immorality publicly, but I did. I will link a video down below from Tobias Leenaert, author of How to Create a Vegan World, that I really recommend watching, that explains his concept of lowering the barrier to entry and how important it is in more detail. I also believe that my past behavior and the continuing behavior of many is an example of why we need to think about strategies for affecting systemic change and not just about encouraging individuals to change their consumer habits, although that's well and good. As an example, I still sometimes buy plastic bottles. I have a Diet Coke addiction that I'm currently challenging myself to quit, and sometimes the glass bottles aren't available to satisfy that vice. However, even so, I would absolutely love it if the government made single-use plastic bottles illegal, and then all of these businesses that I'm currently buying them from would have to sell alternatives. They'd probably have to come up with like some kind of refill system. I would love that. That would be amazing. There are all kinds of cases where people want something to change, but they don't feel willing or able to go out of their way under the current system to actually change their own behavior. But if they find themselves in a situation where they have to adapt to a change, then they'll actually end up doing it without much complaint and may even support it. In New Zealand, we banned single-use plastic bags at supermarkets a while ago, and there were so many people who always used plastic bags who are now perfectly happy using reusable bags and are happy that the change was made. In 2017, a survey found that 47% of adults in the USA wanted an outright ban on slaughterhouses. That's so much higher than the number of vegetarians, so most of these people are people who are still purchasing and eating meat. They do not want to be the ones who are leading positive change in this area, but they'll go along with it when it happens. So it's so important that if and when we get involved in activism, we also get involved in pushing for systemic change. And this is again part of lowering that barrier to entry. Essentially, the harder it is to lead a vegan lifestyle, the greater the level of commitment to the cause one has to have in order to do so. And we want, or we should want, if we genuinely want to bring about a vegan world, for it to get easier and easier so that the commitment level required gets lower and lower, and we eventually have people who don't particularly care about the ethical issues leading a vegan lifestyle, not using animal products, because it's just simply easier for them not to. I'm going to be sharing more videos in the future on my journey beginning to get involved in vegan activism and my thoughts on different animal rights related issues, so subscribe if you'd like to stick around for any of that. I'm also going to be starting a vegan book club, which I'm really looking forward to, and please give this video a like if you enjoyed watching and comment telling me how you became vegan. I love how we all have such different stories, but there are often so many similar parts to them as well, so let me know yours. do your best to be kind today, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!